Hello there and welcome. I got you a new golem build, and this time it's finally for the Industrious. I wanted to do that since a darned long time, but yeah, I don't know what crossed my mind, but I didn't. So here goes. This one is a cavalry build. It's a golem build at the same time. It uses morale destroying mechanics, and it is darned sturdy as it should be for the Industrious. So let's start as usual with our racial and cultural traits. So I went for nightmare mounts. These are used mostly for your tier 3 shields. These guys are amazing as they destroy enemies' morale, and they destroy enemies' morale if they get the last hit. So everybody on a nightmare mount is a very potent last hitter in that build because it'll destroy the enemy's morale, making them hit less hard. So the other one that I picked up is Defensive Tactics, as it is not stackable, but, you know, we're about sturdiness and resilience, and this build thrives on that. It's a very dirty, cheap mechanic to get more of your sturdiness. Cultural trade-wise, I went for Mana Channelers, as we are summoning a darned lot of golems, and in general, we have a lot of summons in this build that really work well, so I like that one. I went for Reclaimers because yeah, Industrious have a very easy time gathering up more artifacts than others, so you can forge yourself more artifacts than with other factions, and it's a pretty useful thing. I think, though, you could be very well off if you'd be using a Shadow Trade, for example, one for the Scouts or Powerful Evokers, whatever. Shadow would be a powerful alternative to get yourself an early access to knowledge extraction because your build is a wee bit slow on the research side, but more about that in a minute. I think Reclaimers is exchangeable. I wouldn't so much exchange Mana Channelers as, yeah, we really save a lot of mana with that, and mana was pretty long time for this build a pretty big deal. Now, talking tomes now. As you see here, we have very materium heavy build, and obviously the very first tome we're picking up is enchantment, as it yields all the goodness that this build desires. Copper golems as our main frontline that transform into tier 3 spear troops eventually is amazing. And these bronze golems, they are really good as they can cleave. Cleaving attacks are always wonderful. We also gain a power-up for our shield units, and most importantly, Sundering Blades. Sundering Blades is really a bread and butter enchantment for this build, as we love long, dragged fights, and this is just where we increase our damage potential massively with. Purging arrows, well, we don't have really good access to ranged units except for the arbalists, but it is powerful. It has a chance to purge positive status effects from the targets, and therefore I'd say it is worth researching and casting it still, even if you only use a low number of ranged attacks, as the status effect purge is just massive. Awakened tools, well, we really don't need that. End of the line. We can use it, but we don't really need that, I think. Rune Carver's Camp is insofar interesting as we can use it as a mana creator. That's really nifty. And yeah, we can have that for heroes too. The other tier 1, Zeal. Several reasons. Here again, we get a good package for everybody. All our units, except for the supporters that we use, get buffed up by that. Alright, Battle Mages also not, but that's not the big deal. We almost have none of these troops anyways. We gain spirit damage extra, and if we manage to condemn the enemy, that gets doubled. And Inspiring Chant is a powerhouse. We can use this to boost up our crit rate and our damage at the same time. 2 hex radius, these two spells bring a really nice smidge of extra damage into your Industrious build that you will just notice, and it diversifies your damage profile so you're not only physical damage anymore. Really useful stuff. You can of course use the Zealots if you're into it. We have, after all, a low casting cost build. Just remind you that these guys are meant to be lost to attrition eventually. Condemnation and Fanatical Workforce. As you see here, we have tools to build cities extremely fast, and Condemnation is a nice little nuke to increase the damage of your Zeal. We can condemn via heroes. It's sometimes a very, very useful thing as it lowers the status resistance. This becomes later down the road more and more useful. And the Circle of Zealotry is massive as it can boost up your city stability. We are building a lot of stable and powerful cities with this build after all. So tier 2, we're going Tome of the Construct. So this is several reasons there. So first of all, I picked it because it is the resilient variant that we're picking up here. So we have compounding defense, which is, since the bulk of our front line consists out of shields and pole arms, just a massive thing. We have linked mines, making us immune against flanking, generally. That's just amazing. I mean, hyper awareness is really, really powerful, as this lowers, again, the enemy's capabilities of hurting us. And we should definitely try to research the bronze golems as well. You cannot summon them. These are being made in cities. But our cities are gosh darn productive, so doesn't really hinder us from boosting up our army big time with these fellas. If you can get your hands on the cascading commands, even better. Cascading commands are massive, as these will, if your army stands in a cluster, which Industrious really often do, will be applied to the entirety of all your units, because it will just cascade down the road to all of your units, because it just is what it is. And here we gain more retaliation attacks in defense mode, and with that one you gain retaliation and haste and a little bit of strength. So offensive and defensive spell. All in all, do not underestimate the power of Cascading Command Defend, as it allows you to go all in, attack, and after you've done all your attacks before you hit the end turn button, you cast that on your army, and they're all in defense mode, which matters a lot. And they all gain extra retaliation attacks. That is... jeez. And that one is used before you act, obviously, as this one gives you a higher movement, and that can really make a huge difference. On top of that, you get a little bit of a strengthened one. Personally think the Cascading Defend command has a stronger synergy with that build here. So, the Worker Construct Nexus, yeah, I mean, this bad boy is just boosting up whatever is around him, so put him into the middle of things. And Experienced Warsmith is a trait I put onto all of my heroes eventually, as it's less about the defense. This one. Your golems healing each and every turn wherever you are is massive. The contender to that tome, I want to talk real quickly about that, is Tome of Artificing. I didn't go for that out of two reasons. First off, I didn't feel like we needed the extra damage, although it is always useful to have more crits and stronger support hits. But the Iron Golem is not that useful for this build, as we are using Nightmare Mounts. If you'd be not using Nightmare Mounts, you'd be not so bound to your tier 3 racial units, and you'd be able to use these here as well, as this tome is a massively good fit for a Golem build, obviously, as well. But instead, I went for Doom Herald, because we have Nightmare Mounts, and we are really good at dragging out combat for a darned long time, and that's where this tome really, really shines. That is where this thing really hits hard. So, first off, we gain Banshees. We don't use Battle Mages that much, but if you want to use them in your regiments, consider them not so much as a source of direct damage. They are meant to pop into the enemy and debuff the hell out of them. That is their main role. If they die during that combat, be it so. It's not much of a big deal. These girls are just made to debuff and destroy the enemy's morale before you go to town. Cause Despair, we have here a really heavy debuff on the enemy's morale. Joy Siphoners, so that's also another reason why we stay on our tier 3 racials. This does not apply to your golems, mind you that. This only applies to your cultural flesh and blood units. Cruel Weaponry, though, applies to all of your units, so there's a pretty nice synergy between your cultural and the golem troops, and I really, really like that. So we also gained Doom Depth Trenches, which should motivate you to go evil in that build. You benefit a lot from going evil. If you have a Doom Depth Trench in every city you build, you generate a considerable amount of knowledge and mana. And the powerful thing about these bad boys is you don't need anything adjacent to them. You just need to be evil to get the most out of them. It's a pretty nice thing. Prelude of Doom, it is powerful. It is powerful. You can just straight out debuff an enemy army directly before the combat begins. Altogether, this tome powers up your long-term hurt in the battle, and it brings the enemy to the point where they are going to be fleeing at some point if they fight long enough against you. All factors that are really good for you. Tier 3, we go Transmutation. As this tome is just a godsend for the industrious culture in general. Here goes the Transmuter. These destroy the enemy's defense and bolster your guy's defense. Bolstered defense can be utilized by the Industrious as a steroid. Other cultures cannot do that. We can transform every stack of bolstered defense directly into strengthened and fortune stacks. So, massive. Just massive. Again, these are not so much about the damage, they're about the utility. Also, Petrify. Who doesn't want a 1 hex radius stun spell? I cannot imagine who doesn't. We also have Melt Armor, which is a decent nuke with a really nasty side effect, so you can prime up your enemies that you need to destroy quickly. We can transmute our mana into productivity if that ever is useful for you. I don't think that I ever came into the situation where I needed that. And Adaptive Armor, which provides magic resistance whenever the enemy hits you with that, and Steel Skin, which is again for your cultural units. Doesn't matter for your golems, but it is worth the investment as it just brings us more of the same goodness. And the Transmutation Circle, it can mimic magic materials. It is amazing. Anyways, tier 3, we continue down the road with the Dreadnought. If you don't have this tome here, you could also replace it if you'd wanted to with Terramancy. Actually, not bad to just drive into that, but Dreadnought is just a superior tome. Simple, warding metals, buffs or shields, and or golems, and gives us a flat-out +3 on magical resistance. From this point on, it will become really disgustingly hard to kill your units. Tuning kits is a really nice skill for your constructs, making them hit crazy hard with a chance to stun themselves. But seriously, our supporters were already useful before they had that skill. And it's a free action, mind you. Once per battle though, but yeah, you now have the ability to nuke stuff. And the Ironclad. Not bad at all. Not bad at all. So, destabilized mana core, well, disrupting disables enemies' unit enchantments, which can be massive. The marking is not so interesting for us, but this explosion kind of thing is really good for us. You can just plant that into the back of the enemy. And pinning Mirage, well, this is mostly a reverse spell. You can use it. It is pretty decent. It's a 2 hex radius nuke, but all together, I really felt like the other spells were shining way more. So tier 4, Tome of Severing for the Severing Golem, and massive abilities to destroy the enemy's own enchantments. Disrupting Blades only works for polearms though, so you have to work on that. We can destroy Magic Origin units. We can destroy corpses, so we have a hot counter for necromancy shenanigans as well. And Null Shield, yeah. Status resistance now for our shield units. We are going places. And after that, you pick up Golden Realm and win the game. Or you pick up Golden Realm first and Severing after. It is up to you. The Gold Golem is a powerhouse. It stuns, it kills people, it has infinite retaliations, it transforms enemies into gold. There's just, yeah, this thing is bonkers. And your build is specialized to buff the hell out of that thing harder than anybody else. So that's pretty much where I don't know how to stop you at that point anymore. We gain Gilding Blast, so we have now a 1 hex radius combat spell nuke. We have the Reagent Refinery, as if our cities weren't already productive enough. And at that point, you just crank out gold at a speed that's beyond stupid. Now, let's move on over to the strategy pod. You are very, very weak early on. Your main interest is to clear out sites, get yourself a sizable amount of golems together, and build cities until you have all the cities that you want to. Once you hit your second tier 1 tomes, things are going better, but you really need to keep together your golems and all of your other troops. And what's interesting in this build is you can't skip the anvil gods. These are not too necessary. They can be used sometimes, but arbalists are useful at all stages. They are just a little bit easy to nuke out, but I'd recommend to have a few of them, as they can destroy enemies' retaliation attacks. That is pretty nasty, and they cancel out defense modes as well. These are really useful, hit quite hard, and useful at all points of the game, ironically enough. Sadly, we don't have a better archer, so you can positively rely on these. Tier 2, Steel Shapers. Get yourself a lot of Steel Shapers, at least 3 if not more. They can get bolstered defense on somebody, and then they can destroy those stacks to heal and strengthen the troop. Grant Defense is a free action, so you can burst heal quite easily with that, but the real charm lies in the Steel Fury chant, which destroys all of these stacks and transforms them into strengthened and fortune stacks, which means your Steel Shapers can either burst heal, buff, transform things into strengthening boosts, and, well, they have a physical range attack that isn't too horrible either. All in all, these are your utility units you will be working a lot with, and they are really, really good. Also, research Steel Fury chant as fast as you can, as this is a battlefield-wide massive power-up. It really does matter a lot. Don't worry too much about losing copper golems due to attrition early on. With this build, I had a lot of trouble keeping my copper golems long enough alive to transform them into bronze golems. The point is, this build has such a massive economy. You see here, we're not even deep down into that game, and we're printing out these troops like candy. So if you can't win a game by just spamming out these dudes and they have to die without evolving, it is okay. It doesn't matter that much. These are your throwaway troops. Your long-term goal is to cement up your rosters to look something like this. Lots of shields and a couple of supporters. Lots of spears and supporters. And here it's similar. By the way, this troop stack just destroyed, had 3 tussles with triple stacks in a row on a high resolution, and that's what we ended up with. This build is sturdy, and your goal should be to have as many tier 3 units available in your ranks as possible. Don't overdo it with the arbalists. They are really the weakest part of your build, but I keep stressing it out. We have no shock units, and overdraw crossbow is the closest thing to a charge attack that we got in our build. Hero-wise, we want obviously to go into a supporty playstyle. We can totally use Mass Rejuvenation. This is a really, really powerful thing to pick up, as this build is not so interested in these 3-turn combat summons as other builds, as we strive for long battles where we destroy the enemy after a while. So instead, our roster looks like that. I picked up pretty much all of the training skills that I could to make my units hit harder. We obviously also have Spur to Action, and like I said already, Experienced Warsmith is pretty much a must-have, and Experienced Leader here, again, the same usefulness as with all of the evolution builds. You can retire a experienced leader hero, put him into a backwater province, summon a ton of copper golems in his entourage, and let them slowly ripen up while that hero can clear out little quests that spawn in your backwater provinces. Altogether, this build explodes from the first tier 2 tome on. Therefore, you'd really need to get your knowledge game going. I had lots of trouble early on getting my knowledge going. As you see here, we're really late with the first tier 3 tome in that run. So my recommendations are to help yourself in that. Try to get yourself an early shadow affinity. It could even go as far, like I said, to pick up a cultural trade, replace something here among these for a shadow affinity point. You can also pick up a signature skill on level 4 for your hero. That would also create shadow affinity. Either way, it is really worth going down that way to get knowledge extraction going. Generally, Shadow is really good at producing knowledge on the Imperium skills. We are massively good at building cities here, so utilize all the goodness from the Materium tree. And I also want to stress out that this infusion of 2000 gold, you gain so much Materium affinity with this build that you can use this so early. I just snowballed out of that. As usual, you want to have as many prospectors as possible early on to prospect all the mountains, because that is where your money is at. Also, I want to showcase, these are artifacts I made myself. Spider Act, that is a tier 1 thing, you can just create that early on, and Rods of Healing. All the other things that you want to forge, go for it. It depends on your situation, but these spider wands and healing wands, they are so good for your early game. That's why I made them. Okay, that's pretty much all I have to say. Yeah, from tier 2 on, you can just cement your lead. The moment you have the Doom Herald tome up, you should totally try to have a couple of these. Try to get these guys incorporated into your build, as they are the best company to your golem spears. And try to give them the last hits because of their vicious killer trait for your arbalists, so the enemy's morale will crumble faster. You can also use their inspiring defense to point blank AoE, give stacks of that. So there's a lot of goodness, and the only downside is it starts out relatively weak and battles take a darn long time. But apart from that, this build is an unstoppable force, in my opinion, that has almost no weaknesses except for its slowness. So I hope you have fun with that. Leave me your comments down below. A thumbs up would be appreciated. Consider subscribing and check out the description box. It's filled with links to Discord, Twitch, and Patreon, PayPal, and Buy Me a Coffee, and also my channel membership system. Check it out if you want to. And last but not least, thanks to the supporters of the channel, and thanks to you. I hope you had a good time, and see you all on the next video. Bye bye!